And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bowling Explained. I'm your host, Jason Thomas. Have a great show for you today. It's a show that I've wanted to do for a long time. It's about the scoring system in bowling. So hopefully you guys stick around, because believe me, there's going to be some mind-blowing stuff that happens on this show today that you're going to want to stick around to see. I am a huge fan of the scoring system of bowling. I think it's one of the most beautiful parts of the sport. It's also one of the most interesting and unexplored parts of the sport these days. And it's funny because today there are so many technical things that go on with the sport that you really have to know in order to be good at it. And one of the things that's been lost, I think, over time is people's ability to understand the scoring pace and how that impacts the strategy in the sport. So we're going to talk about that today. The scoring system was adopted over 100 years ago. It was actually adopted at the same time the ABC was founded. On the day of the founding of the American Bowling Congress, the scoring system was adopted. Prior to the current system that we use, that uses 300 as the maximum score, there was a 20 ball system that was kind of popular at the time. And so the day that they got together to found the ABC, they had a debate over which scoring system to use. There was a man named Louis Stein who wasn't the inventor of the scoring system, but he argued for it and basically said, hey, if we use this scoring system, it gives bowlers, a bigger opportunity to get higher scores. So he convinced everybody in the room to do it, and that's been the scoring system we've used ever since. It's stood the test of time. I think it's incredibly exciting when you understand it, how it works, especially when you have head-to-head matches. With the advent of the automatic scoring system that started happening in the 1980s, the art of keeping score was somewhat of something that kind of has become lost over the last several decades. I remember growing up, I used to keep score for my dad in his leagues and his tournaments. I used to make tip money doing that, and it was a lot of fun. But whenever you had a tournament, you had to, have scorekeepers, for all the pairs that were in use. So it was something that I used to, do and enjoy doing. But I believe it's something that we've lost a little bit in terms of, the numbers of people that actually understand how the scoring system works. In fact, there are some pros that I know that aren't familiar. Like if you ask them, hey, score this game, they wouldn't be able to do it, which, in my mind is just unbelievable. That you'd be a professional at something and not understand how to keep score. So we're going to talk about it today. One of the thing that I think is the most mind-blowing about what we're going to talk about today, we're going to have Tom Frenzel on, who I always enjoy having on the show. He's a research engineer here at USBC in the Specifications and Certifications Department. He's an expert in the field of statistical and data analysis. He also is known here on BowlTV as the driver of Earl. But he created, at my request, a match probability calculator that we've used on our TV shows in the past, and we're going to roll it out in a bigger way on BowlTV this year. So we're gonna show you a little bit about how that works and score one of the more famous matches in the history of the sport, and kind of watch the fortunes of the players unfold as the game goes on. And so I'm looking forward to showing you guys that. But without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest,
Mr. Tom Frenzel. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, I always enjoy talking to you. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is the scoring system. And so just to get started, how did you first learn how to keep score?
Well, I started bowling when I was 11. So how did I first learn how to keep score? Well, I don't really remember exactly how it happens. But, everyone explains to you that you want to knock all the pins down as much as you can, right? So, yeah. And then you learn, strikes double your next two balls, and spare doubles your next ball, and you start to learn tricks like if I strike out in the 9th or 10th frame, I'm going to get 60. You just start to pick up on little things as you try it more and more. But any type of math or counting or multiplying, it's all just math, and I'm really good at math. So it wasn't too hard for me to pick up on how it was working. But yeah. So I just kind of learned it because that's what you do. You know, you want to know if you're going to win or not. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's there's no point in playing the game if you can't win or lose, right?
Yeah.
Except golf. So
I don't only keep this for golf. It's just kind of too depressing.
But so what are some of the research projects that you've worked on with respect to scoring and some of the data analysis that you've done here at USBC?
Well, I mean, a lot of our research tries to tie back into scoring, whether it's projects with our bowl score robot, how many pins does it knock down, attacking the pocket at different angles.
Which we've talked about on the show.
Yeah. And whether it's even just like lane pattern analysis, can bowlers score more or less on this lane pattern? There's lots of different things we try to tie back to scoring. And actually, one of the most abundant source of data I've had to really dig into the scoring system is that now with our current our TMS system that does the scoring at the Open Championships, we actually get frame by frame data for every single game bowled on that system. So
yeah.
Now I can go back through several years of Open Championships data and have the exact frame marks of every game.
Yeah,
that gives me a really big sample of a tougher condition, but how do our league bowlers bowl on this type of condition?
Sure.
What we're putting up on the screen now, this is a histogram of all the scores at the Open Championships, 2017, 18, and 19. So there's about 400,000 games here, and this is one of my favorite histograms because it's not normally distributed.
Yeah.
If you know a statistician, normal distributions are boring. I mean, they're useful because they're easy to do stuff with, but stuff like this is exciting because, man, it's not normal. Why is it not normal, right? And after doing some digging into this, what I found is it's not normal because of things like doubles and spares that end up doubling one of your first balls somewhere down the road, right?
Yeah.
And the probability of getting a 0 through 10 on your first ball is also not uniform. So it's much harder to get 2 than it is to get all 10, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? So we dug into that data, and we really found that honestly anything 5 count and less is really low probability, and then 6 count up, it starts to build up. And the most popular thing for any one given first ball is actually a strike. The strike's actually the easiest thing to do for our Open Championships.
Yeah, that's kind of surprising because you think, especially at the Open Championships, where the conditions are a little bit more difficult, that strikes wouldn't be as easy to come by.
Well, that's the interesting thing is that in league you might strike 60% of the time. You might get 7 or 8 strikes in a game, but at the Open Championships, even the best bowlers, people in the red blocks you're seeing there, the regular division, as a group, they're only striking about 35% of the time.
Yeah.
So strikes are down by half when you compare it to like a league setting.
Yeah.
But it's still the most popular first ball count in all the categories, except for the classified. They men count a little bit more than they strike.
Okay.
But in general, strike's the most common thing.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. I know that you also have done some analyses on, what people get in certain frames, right? Like, what is the most common, 10th frame combination of what's happening? What are those things look like?
All right. So if we take those 400,000 games, all right, and we break that down into frames, multiply by 10, you got 4 million frames to look at, right? So lots of stuff to look at there. So this tab here is actually looking at 10th frames. I mean, we know that 10th frame, we got extra opportunities, right?
Yeah.
There's actually more than 3 times as many ways to mark a 10th frame as there is to mark, right around 3 times. There's 66 ways to mark a normal frame. If you count fouls and gutters as the same thing.
Isn't there a song about that, like 66 ways to leave your lover?
Something like that. Something like that. And then in the 10th frame, there's like 241 ways. So 60 times 4, honestly, it's 241. But
yeah.
So there's there's a lot of different things to happen on the 10th frame. And what's interesting is when I plotted this data, it said the most popular thing that you could do is 9 out in the 10th frame.
It's very sad. That's my least favorite way to end the game, personally.
But then I dug a little deeper and I said, oh, well, it's only 7% of the time. So 7 out of 100 games you're going to 9 out.
Okay.
So that's not too bad.
Yeah, I guess.
And then what I realized is happening here, where strikes were the most common thing. If you look at all the different 10th frame options in this table, and you add up all the ones that start with a strike, it's actually 30% of the time your first ball is still a strike.
Well, that's encouraging.
In the 10th frame, yeah.
And a turkey is actually pretty high up on the leaderboard there.
Yeah,
so
turkey.
3.6% of the time.
Yeah, 3% chance to turkey in the 10th. That's pretty good.
That makes it feel better. So yeah, here's the
frame by frame results, and like you said,
X is the most common. X marks the spot. 9 spare, 8 spare, 9 out. Unfortunately, is pretty high on the leaderboard.
Yeah, out of the 4 million frames, there's over 1 million strikes on the first ball, and it just works its way down from there. What's interesting to me is, and you can't really see it here, but just on the first ball analysis, that a gutter is more popular than a 5 count. Gutters happen on the first ball more than a 5 count at the open, and anything between a 5 count and a 1 count, really. So, and it makes sense because you're used to swinging it wide, and you swing it wide at the open, they're going to fall in the trash. If you look at number 20 on this most popular chart, it's actually gutter spare.
Okay.
Gutter spare happens some small percentage of the time, but that's because striking is the most popular thing. So if you do gutter, the most popular is one of the easiest spares to make.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you take all this data, and what do you do with it? Are I know there are some practical applications for it, from a standpoint of what you're analyzing, but if you're just talking to a regular bowler, what would you say based on the scoring system would be the things that they would want to work on in order to improve their average?
Right. Well, I mean, this data set's kind of wide arcing, across all the bowlers that bowl the Open Championships. But what you'd really want to do is track what happens in your game. Like, okay, I go 9 out way too much. And I go 9 out way too much because I miss corner pins, or I go 9 out because I miss left side spares, or whatever it is, and try to fix that problem. Try to tackle the problem that's most probable, right? What is your outcome that's bad that happens the most often? Tackle that one first, and that's going to see the biggest swing in your overall score. Is by fixing your problems that happen the most.
Yeah. And
then working down one by one until you get there. Obviously, my best way to make my spares is to strike on the first ball.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting in the data where we showed the different levels between the classified and regular division and the standard division. How the classified bowlers tend to get 9 more often, which means they're not stringing as many strikes, right? And stringing strikes is probably the best way to rapidly increase your score, correct?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you don't string a strike after another, you're just leaving pins on the table. So a lot of times the way I think about the scoring system is every frame starts at 30. And then any miss that's not a strike is actually a penalty. So instead of thinking about using marks to build your score, I think about missing marks to lose my score.
Yeah. I think I used to think about it that way for sure, and I know pros do, because one of the things pros hate to do is leave a tap, in the middle of a string of strikes, because it costs them 21 pins.
Right.
It's worse than missing a spare. So missing a spare only costs you 11 pins. But I'm sure the reason the classified bowlers are the classified bowlers is because they're leaving a lot of 9 counts, so they're not stringing a lot of strikes, and they're not making as high a percentage of 9 counts, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that goes hand in hand. Yeah. But, there's lots of things that could factor into leaving a 9 count. Whether it's lower ball speeds in that division, or maybe it's less entry angle, less rotation on the ball. There's lots of things that could put you in that division that you could then learn about your game and try to improve and move up into another division.
Yeah. So. Now, and you've done, we've talked about this on other shows, but with BowlScore, which is a device that you guys have downstairs that allows you to just run millions of shots on a simulation.
out of those 9 counts, what are the more common leaves that you see? With
Right. So in bowl score, we run the ramp in a way where we attack the pocket uniformly across the width of it. So we're hitting light in the pocket just as much as high in the pocket. But overall, you look at the top 3 leaves, it goes strikes, 10 pins, 7 pins. So if you're keeping your ball in the pocket, more likely than not, you're either going to strike or leave a corner pin. So it's really important we know how to take out those corner pins.
Yeah, for sure. I've struggled with them from time to time. I know people around the world have as well. But what if you were working with a youth bowler, right? And they wanted to get better fast. Would you work on them more on making those commonly left spares, or would you work on them trying to get better at striking?
That's a great question, and it's kind of hard to have an overarching answer. But I would work on their consistency, because as a new starting bowler, I feel like your game is going to be very varied in your footwork, and your timing, and all these things that help you get to the ball to the same spot. If you want to strike or shoot a spare, you need to have consistent footwork and consistent swing timing to even hit the same mark every time. So you really need to work on. If someone's brand new, you really need to work on some kind of consistency drill where they're working on their tempo and their footwork.
Yeah, that's true. I know, on tour, there was a player named Dave D'Entremont who was a really top player back in the 90s and early 2000s. And he led the tour in points one season, and was known as a dreadful spare shooter. But he would usually miss the spare and then follow it up with a 6 or 7 bagger to make up for it. So I don't think you can underestimate the importance of striking and stringing strikes. And if you go back to the point that I made at the beginning of the show, where the reason the scoring system that we have now was adopted is to give players a bigger opportunity if they string strikes to add points to your score. The old system 200 was max, and with the current system that we use now, 300 is the max. You really can't make up those pins by making spares. You have to string strikes, right?
Right. Anytime you spare, you're technically losing pins, because if you put a spare in a frame, you've now capped that frame at 20 pins. So you lost 10 pins, no matter what string you're on, no matter what happened, you lost a minimum of 10 pins in that frame, because it's maximum from 30 to 20.
Yeah.
And if you're on a double, you lost those 10 pins plus 10 pins from the previous frame that you didn't get a strike. Right, your two doubles on the last frame got used up in one frame, so you lost 10 there. And then if you had a strike before that, you lose 1 pin because you got a 9 count instead of a strike.
Right.
And 21 comes from like a 3-frame problem. So the scoring system really puts this interdependency between the frames, where a different system may not, and that's where the stringing becomes really important. Anytime you don't strike, you're leaving pins on the table.
Yeah, we had Deandra Asbady on the show a few months back, and she had an interesting story where she was talking with Jason Belmonte, and at one point in the conversation, she asked him, what is the most important frame in a game? And his answer was the 10th frame, right? Because I think a lot of pros think, well, we need to finish the game out right, and so that's the most important frame. And then she came back and said, well, aren't all the frames just as important? And, that was a big moment for him, because it made him think, gosh, you're right. I'm not paying attention as much as I should. I'm giving pins away, in certain frames because it doesn't have my full attention. But from a statistical standpoint, is what she's saying true? Or are there frames that are more important than others, in order to fill?
Well, I mean, I think it is true 100% from the perspective that you get 30 pins per frame. There are a couple differences between different frames, and it's how much you get punished for missing that you can look at, and it's also how much effort you had to put in to get those 30 pins. Right. So in the case of 10th frame, I have to pull 3 strikes to get my 30 pins. So That's maximum effort. That's the hardest frame to get 30 in. And I say that it's kind of the same thing. It's really the 10th frame, just you get the strike, and then you have your opportunity for your 2 bonus balls. So really you had to bowl 3 strikes to get 30 pins in any frame.
Yeah.
But it compounds in 1 through 9 to where it's 1 strike and you got 30, 1 strike and you got 30. Once you're on a double, you're only bowling 1 strike for those 30 pins. So you're kind of what I call on fire after you get that double.
Yeah.
You want to stay
Like
on
NBA
fire.
Jam.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I feel like it's actually less effort in 1 through 9 to get you 30 pins, which is interesting. And then, like I said, the 9th spare punishes you not just in the 9th spare, but the 2 previous frames. So you're better off sticking the 9th spare in the first frame for 290, or the 9th spare in the second frame for 280, or the 9th spare after the first and the 10th for 289.
Yeah.
Or at the very end of the game, 299, right? So
yeah, right.
those 4 positions hurt you less than anywhere else. Now, second frame, it's only 1 pin different, but it's still 1 pin. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's all it takes. So the way I look at it is she's absolutely right. You need that mentality that every frame is equally important.
Yeah.
But you also need to know if you're having a rough game and you need to make an experiment, you need to know to do that either after the first strike in the 10th or the first frame of the next game. Make your experiment where you're not going to get maximum punish.
Yeah, and I think, especially professionals, they will take that test shot, the second shot in the 10th frame, but you almost never see it in the first frame of the next game. And I think part of it is because the player is moving pairs, and so they have to get a read on the pair first.
Sure.
But like in league, do you think it's because you're not moving better to maybe try something in the first frame because it's not going to punish you as much if it doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see any. I would do that in my personal league bowling, because if I couldn't strike at all in the 10th frame, you have a couple things going for you in cross lane league bowling. Is that, well, you just threw however many shots you had in the 10th on the exact same lane, so you get to try this out. The lane you're starting on is the one you finish on. You get to try out your experiment on the exact same thing you just threw on. So if you go strike, 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 you already have three frames of data on that lane. You probably don't need to make a move unless you saw something that said maybe I should, like a trip 4 pin or something of that nature. But if you went, say you went strike 9, you went strike 9 out, you missed your 10 pin or whatever. Then at first frame of the next game, you should totally try something different besides leaving that 10 pin.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Worst case, you lose 10 pins.
Right.
Best case, you gain 30.
Yeah.
So it's risk reward at that point.
Yeah, and this whole thing brings up a great point. You and I are big fans of chess. You're probably a better player than I am.
I don't know about that.
But bowling is really like a chess game when you understand it from the standpoint of scoring. And so one of the projects that we've worked on together was a way to try to display that more directly visually on television. And so the way we did it was we created a probability algorithm. And I actually started on one that I sent you, and you said, hey, that's good, but it's not really how it works. It's not really how probability works. And I was like, okay, well, how does it work? And then you went away over a weekend and built this awesome calculator, which actually can tell you what the probability that someone is going to win a match based on the particular score in the match at the time, which to me was fantastic, because that's actually what, when the pros are bowling against each other, that's what they're figuring out in their head when they have to make moves. They are looking at the score and saying, what's the probability that this person's going to do X in order to force me to do Y? And then they make their moves based on that. So I thought it was super cool. So I'm going to actually throw it up on the screen.
Sure.
And we're going to go through one of the all-time classic matches in bowling history. To, unfortunately, hopefully Chris Barnes is not watching, because he's not going to like this one very much.
And I can go ahead and give some background on how it works and what it's doing in the background.
Okay.
Because a lot of you viewers might be familiar if you've ever watched professional poker, right? they typically show the hand's probability of winning. And that's kind of what we're going for here is we wanted to know what probability any bowler had at any given time during the thing. But the problem is with bowling is that there's a lot more possible outcomes in a game than there are cards in the deck. So the probabilities get really, 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 really large and really, really, really hard to handle. So this isn't exactly, a theoretically perfect prediction of the probability. What this is an estimator. So what it's doing is you'll see a box in the bottom left. It's number of games to simulate. So based on a strike percentage for each bowler and based on a table of how often 9 counts get converted, 8 counts get converted, etc., what it's doing is it's running through 1,000 simulations and counting however many times bowler A beats bowler B and vice versa. And then it's taking those 1,000 into a percentage. So for instance, right now, based on the current simulation,
and
where this
the
game's currently at, right?
Right.
Frame 3, Chris Barnes' simulation, he won 901 of the simulated games for 90.1%. Haugen won, it would have been 95 of the 1,000 games for 9.5%, and they actually draw 4 out of the 1,000 games for 0.1%. So that's really what's happening in the background. Every time we type in a new ball and click update, it's going to go through a process of that simulation and then output the new win chances for us right there, as well as in parentheses at the end of the game, possible max score.
So Haugen gets a strike in the fourth, and his chances go up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Strikes help.
Barnes goes 9 spare before.
Okay.
And we'll update it.
Update it, yeah.
It's crunching a lot of numbers.
Yeah, it should crunch a little faster as you get towards the end of the game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to crunch every single ball throw, including the spare conversion.
So this is where it gets really crazy. So Haugen goes up in the fifth and opens again.
Oh, Lord.
And it's not looking good for
I think
Haugen.
I might have seen this match on YouTube.
Yeah. And then Barnes goes up in fifth and sixth, and he says, "Okay, I'm dominating you.
Yeah.
This is over, buddy. Don't even think about."
He's going to need an ace on the river or something.
Yeah, exactly. So look at the win chance now, going up into Haugen's sixth frame, 98.5. Haugen.
I think most of us flipped to a different channel at this point.
Yeah. I didn't, but I can see how some of you would. Haugen goes up in the sixth, then he goes 9 spare, and now he's almost virtually certain to lose the match.
Yeah, so he lost another 10 possible pins in that frame, and he's getting closer and closer to the end of the game. So he's just running out of odds to get back above it.
Yeah.
You better go off the sheet.
Well, the good news is he makes a ball change and strikes in the 7th. And so now, still got a 1%. So
Right.
There's a chance.
There's a chance.
There's a chance. Okay, so now Chris goes up and goes 9 spare.
Okay.
And then he goes 9 spare again.
Ouch.
So that's still pretty good.
Oh, wait. Make sure you put the spare in the second box there.
Yeah.
We don't want to crash this
No,
thing.
it's not.
It's still a prototype.
So here we go. Update it again. And, still 98% chance with just 2.5 frames left.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be brutal, isn't it?
Haugen goes up and strikes. And it's still looking pretty bleak.
Barnes 9 spared on a double. That's minus 21. And then he 9 spared again for minus 11.
Haugen strikes again in the 9th. So now his chances go up a little to a whole 3.1%.
So if you didn't have this tool and you were the sportscaster right now, what would you be saying?
Well, I would be trying to get people to stay, and I would say, hey, it's not over yet. Mathematically, Barnes still has a chance to lose this match, and Haugen still has a chance to win, but Haugen has to strike, otherwise it's over. Right? And I think that's how Randy called it.
And then
Chris goes up in the ninth and goes 9 out.
And
That's
then
minus 21 right there.
boom.
He's still
He's still a
looking
favorite.
good.
He's still a favorite because, I mean, what? Even if Haugen were to triple in the 10th, his score in the 9th would be less than Chris's, right? So
Yeah.
So all Chris has to do is close the 10th, and he still wins.
Well, Haugen finishes first, and he goes strike, strike, 9,
And
gives himself a reasonable chance
to win.
Yeah, that's basically the best he could have done since the ball change. He lost 1 pin off of what he could have done since the ball change. So
Yeah.
he put up his best effort. He did not give up.
And the crazy thing is, look at this. It's 40% chance of a tie. You know, you had the old Burton possibility of a tie. I mean, this is a real possibility of a tie. Because a strike spare or a spare strike is like a suit in cards. You know, the odds of pulling a 10 are very high.
Sure.
So Chris goes up and goes 9 spare.
And it just
Basically, it's going to come down to one ball here, where
He's either going to tie or lose.
right, which is crazy. Like 2 frames ago, he was 98% chance of winning the match, and now he has a 0% chance, and all he can do is tie. And then, as you all know, he gives a 4-pin, he falls on the floor. Haugen runs over and high fives everybody in the crowd, and that's the end.
What a crazy game.
What a crazy game. Absolutely crazy. So,
and this really goes to one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about doing this episode is you could be on a double in the 8th and 9th and then open the 10th, right? And I think everybody's done it. Or they're on a double and open the 10th and they feel like, oh, really? How did I do that? But when you do that, you lose 9. You use the pin from 2 frames ago.
yeah.
Then you only get 9 in that one. You lost 11 in the previous frame, and you lost 21 in the current frame. So that's 12 plus 21. You lose 33 points.
Yeah.
When you open that 10th,
Yeah.
that really gives a huge way up for the other person to win.
And that's why I love the scoring system so much. I mean, right there, it's why the scoring system is so awesome. And I think people need to understand, like, when you get to the pro level, the pros are thinking in terms of, I'm always going to go off the sheet. You know, I'm always going to, wherever I am in the game, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to strike out. And so one of the things that you did that I thought was interesting is when we did Journey to 900, you took that calculator and you calculated the probability that we would bowl a 900. So when we started, did you remember off the top of your head when we started each it's only been done 30 times or something, I think 32 times, maybe 34 in the history of bowling. So it's pretty rare still, even though people say it's easy now. It's not.
Right.
And so it's this infinitesimal number when you start off. But I think what would be interesting to show, like when you show the max score on a telecast, what is the probability that the person's actually going to bowl the max score? Right.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one. And when we were doing it on Journey to 900, it worked a little different. I wasn't necessarily running simulated games for that. One way to estimate probability is to raise the odds of something happening to the number of times it needs to happen in a row. And that estimate actually gets worse the more times you have to raise the power. Right. So in the case of bowling, if you say you struck 60% of the time, and you raise 0.60 to the 12th power to get 12 in a row. I forget exactly what it comes out to be, but it's not very good.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. But if you get up to 80% strikes, it actually seems pretty reasonable. Like once in every, I forget if it was 100 or a few hundred games.
Yeah, I think that it was like, once every, if you bowl set every year, every day, bowl one. 900.
Yeah, I forget exactly what strike percentage we base that off of. But you can take whatever your strike percentage is and raise it to the 12th power, and that would give you an estimate of your odds of bowling a 300 game.
Yeah.
To the 36th power to get to 900. But honestly, most stats people are going to tell you if you're using that method for 36 iterations, it's probably not going to be accurate. So what I moved to doing was just taking the distribution of our series that we've bowled so far. So we shoot 750, 770, 680, 780, 602, whatever.
During the 700.
Yeah, there's some pretty rough weeks in there.
There's some pretty rough comments in the YouTube chat.
What are you going to do? It's bowling. It's tough. But yeah, you take the distribution of those series and you see where in the bell curve does 900 away and what percentage is past 900. That's your odds of getting there. And I think if you did that for Wes Malot's games that he came in and drove, he had a pretty good chance of getting there in the league season with Earl. He just needed some more tries. But he was definitely better at reading the pattern than yours truly, no doubt.
Well, there's certainly an art to that part of it. It's not just lining them up, and
you do have to make the adjustment.
So anyway, it drives me nuts that people don't know how to keep score, right? Why would you say it's important for somebody to understand how the scoring system works so that they can use it to their advantage in getting better at bowling?
So, I mean, using the scoring system to your advantage, really understanding the scoring system really tells you should strike as much as you can. And if you're going to strike, try to string them in a row. Because if you go strike open, strike open, strike open, strike open, that's not going to be a good game, right? 50% strikes can be, almost 150 halfway through the game, or it can be a $140 game because you opened everything in between them, right? So,
sure.
It's really about the scoring system. Really teaches you really need to focus on every ball. You really need to be in the moment with every ball and make sure you're giving it your best effort. And if
it's back to what Deandra said, right?
100%. Like when I think about one of the questions I read about this was, does knowing the scoring system make you a better bowler? And man, that seems like no one's the same. No one's the same. So for some people, it might be like, yeah, I need a double and 7 to win this, so I'm going to get double and 8. Here we go. Right? So it might light their fire to know exactly what they need and know they have a chance. But for another person, that might make them overthink, and then they miss because they're stressing out like, oh man, I need a double and 7. Versus they could just be thinking, oh, this match is close, I better strike.
Yeah, it's a great point. So, it's a great point. I always wanted to know the score because I felt like it made me do better. It made me focus more. But I do know some really great players that just, and a lot of players on the PWBA tour where they just don't want to know anything that's going on. They feel like that hinders their ability to perform, and so they just prefer not to know. They just figure I'm going to do my best no matter what, and who cares what the score is.
I still haven't bowled a certified 300 game.
Okay.
I feel like I'll get there one of these days. But I know when I look at the score in the 5th frame and I've got 5 in a row, I think, man, it's happening. And then I miss. So, I mean, there's definitely something about thinking about the score and thinking about the future can distract us from the present.
Yeah.
Being in the moment is very hard. Being in the moment is very hard.
It's a great point. Great point.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today, sir. That was great information. I love what you're doing with the analysis here on the scoring system. It's something I personally love about the game of bowling. We didn't go through a demo on how to keep score, which I don't think would have had much value here, because I think the folks that are on this show know how to keep score that are watching. But I think it's something that if you're out there watching and you want to teach the younger generation more about the sport and why we love it so much, it's valuable to teach them about the scoring system and how it works and what the scoring system values in terms of how to improve your average at the most rapid pace possible, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate your insight as always, and we will have you on again to talk about more cool statistical type stuff. But thanks again for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
Awesome.
Good luck and high scores, everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Well, that's Tom Frenzel. Frenzel, ladies and gentlemen, someone I always love talking about. You know, the statistical mind that he has is amazing. There are so many different research projects that he has worked on that, you know, if you look into what it is that he's studying, I think it could help make you a better bowler. So please check him out. We've done this is his third episode on the show. So if you haven't seen the episode we did on margin for error or pin carry, be sure to check those out. Whether you're on BowlTV.com or on the BowlTV YouTube channel, they're archived there. And you can also check out some of his work on the bowl.com website in the specifications and certifications section of the website. But we've got some pretty cool stuff coming up. Next week, we've got the SWAC Championship back to collegiate action. And let's see, what time is it? 1:41 p.m. At 2 o'clock today, we're going to be launching a documentary on the PWBA bubble. And so before we sign off today, I'd like to share with you a little teaser on that. And then we'll be back after that to wrap up the show. So hope you enjoyed the info on the scoring system, but be sure to watch this documentary. Again, it launches today at 2 p.m. on our BowlTV YouTube channel. So here's a little sneak peek. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 took a lot of things away from a lot of people. Many, like PWBA Kickoff Classic participant Christy Leong, lost loved ones.
My dad passed away of COVID on December 7th. He was definitely the driving force behind my bowling. I have a patch with his initials, and I'm just wearing it here because it's close to my heart.
For the athletes on the PWBA Tour, it ended up taking away a full season of their careers. But the pandemic also brought on a wave of creative solutions from PWBA staff for how to get bowling back on the lane safely. After months of planning, the full commitment of PWBA athletes to accept the safety protocols that were put in place, and many anxious moments as the pandemic mounted wave after wave of new infections, the successful and safe return of the PWBA Tour brought a much-needed symbolic victory to the staff, athletes, and fans who were yearning for a return to relative normalcy. So be sure to check that out, 2 p.m. on the BowlTV YouTube channel. We'll also get it up on the PWBA.com website and the Bowlers Journal website as well. So you can check it out in both of those places. But I hope you enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to put together. It was a really inspiring week of bowling. And so if you didn't happen to follow us on BowlTV and you just want the 18-minute version of you know, the event that we had there that week, this will give you a really great look at it. And also, you know, how we got from a staffing standpoint, you know, to the procedures and protocols that allowed us to run it safely. So be sure to check that out. I will be off next week, so no episode of Bowling Explained. We've got spring break for the kids, so I'm going to enjoy that. Hope you do as well. But again, end of next week, we've got the SWAC Championship, and then coming up end of the month, the big USBC Masters and US Open events here on BowlTV. Looking forward to those. I will be there, and the whole BowlTV team covering those huge events on the PBA Tour. So I'm looking forward to that. But hope to see you guys soon. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, the BowlTV YouTube channel, if you don't already, for all the great content there. And if you're not a subscriber to BowlTV, be sure to get a subscription now so you can catch the US Open and the Masters coming up later this month and all the other great events. 90 events this year, the PWBA season and all of it. So be sure to check all of that out. And I hope you all have a great day. Remember, on BowlTV, bowling lives here.